All right, Boz, here we go again.
Here we go again, Pat.
This week's episode proudly sponsored by no one. And that way, you know we're telling you the truth. So we have no sponsors to keep happy. Here we go. This is a question that was posted several episodes ago. I kind of harvested some questions and we're going to make our way through them in the next upcoming programs. This is from Anna M. She says, "Dear Pat and Boz, enjoys the show. Appreciate that. I have a question for you about DOMs. I'm a 42-year-old teacher and a mother of 3 from England. Didn't get into exercise until my mid-20s. Started running. Pardon me. My kids got me sick. Did some pretty decent long-distance achievements, but for the past, since 2021, joined my local CrossFit box and fell in love with it instantly. I now train either at the box or at home 5 to 6 days a week, usually 6. I love it. I follow the program, the daily workouts set up by my affiliate, and I believe their programming successfully ticks the boxes that you describe, with being varied, not trying to cram too much in, focusing on the heavy days, etc. So far, by the way, Anna, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, this all sounds great.
Yeah, all good and I love it. One thing that I wonder about is DOMs. Having never experienced them that much, since starting CrossFit, I get DOMs from something or another most days. I do work hard during my workouts, but I know my limits, and I don't feel that I overload myself by trying to lift too heavy, go too quickly, I scale the movements that I haven't got, etc., etc. So my question is, how normal or okay is it to get DOMs on the regular? Am I doing too much or not enough of something? I don't really want to rest every time I get a bit sore, because that would probably take away 50% of my training. I sleep well, eat well, etc., etc. Anyway, would love to hear what you guys have to say." So, good question from Anna.
That's a great question. And I think right out the gate, this is a really awesome platform that Anna's got to be working with. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of ducks in a row in a really constructive way there. So hats off to you, Anna, for getting to that point. That's really cool. I think the first thing, anytime somebody brings up the term DOMs, it immediately sends off a red flag in my mind, because that term is going to mean such a broadly different thing to different people. You come into the gym and that's a term that people kind of pick up early in their gym career, because who hasn't been sore before? I mean, of course that's going to happen. And so it can be applied kind of casually to anything from, I was just a little bit sore from my workout, to I was having trouble getting up the stairs.
Right.
And everything in between.
Let's say for anyone at home who's unfamiliar with it, it stands for Delayed Onset Muscle Soreness. So we're talking about...
There you go. Yep.
You're pretty sore. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And DOMS does have like a true blue clinical definition. And, I don't think that's necessary so much for us to be dogmatic about in this conversation, but I do think it's important to get to the bottom of what does somebody mean when they start throwing around that term. And reading between the lines just a little bit, when I hear her say something like, well, I don't want to rest anytime I get a bit sore, I don't know if that's just an understated British way of saying that I'm really sore, or if I should take her at her word that she's just a little bit sore. But if you're just a little bit sore, I would argue that, of course, you shouldn't not train under those conditions. Now, if you are consistently sore to the point where, to the touch, it's like relatively painful on a regular basis, and you're having trouble, getting up the stairs, you're audibly making noises sitting down onto the couch every time that you do it, things like that, then we have to figure out why, because that isn't normal to go through a state of being that sore consistently, in my opinion. So to me, it's like, all right, let's establish the range that we're talking about here first. Let's figure out what she means by DOMs, and then let's act accordingly. If it's just a little bit of soreness, I think you carry on. If it's a ton of soreness, well, I think we got some more investigating to do. That's kind of my entry point, and I've got some suggestions based on where we think Anna is landing here.
Yes, and a little bit of the DOMs, as we shall say, or the soreness. It can vary, like you said, from mild to severe and everything in between. And to some degree, it's going to be some level of soreness is going to be associated with most of us from working out. Because if you're doing some good functional movements, you're pushing yourself with some intensity. The way that your body as an organism grows and adapts is you stress the system. The system, breaks down a little bit, if you will. There's little bits of damage that are done to muscle tissue, and then during that healing and rebuilding phase, you're going to get potentially some inflammation, potentially a bit of soreness, if you will, of varying degrees. But done properly and appropriately, it's all part of this normal process of being an athlete. Like you're saying, now, if that's just the regular ups and downs that we have, this week was a bit more spicy than last week. This week's kind of more casual. But if every day you dread stairs, you dread going and, sitting down on the toilet, then we've potentially got a different, your lats are so torn up from doing death by pull-ups or like the Nicole workout that you can't get your arms over your head, and you're feeling something like that on a regular basis. I would take a hard look at what's going on for the workouts, how you're approaching those workouts, because that's not the way that you want to live or train. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. And so I start thinking about, okay, what are the triggers that are going to really influence DOMs? And if we start in the gym, the two that jump out to me right away that seem to be the usual suspects when it comes to why am I sore? Number one, it's something that you have not done previously that you are doing for the first time. That's a very surefire way that you're probably going to feel the after effects of that for a few days because you've never been exposed before. So that's pretty common. I'm doing something that I've never been exposed to. Well, you can expect it's probably going to leave a mark, so to speak. And then the second trigger is something that you have not done in a while. And that is one that for the CrossFit athlete is one that rears its head often because there's such a broad range of things that we're doing. By nature, it is almost impossible to have everything in the rotation all the time. It's just something is not going to be touched for a couple of weeks. And that's okay. That's part of the deal if you want to be a generalist. However, you can have a level of fitness that supports you coming back to this exercise that you haven't seen in a while with some pretty high intensity because your general capacity supports it. And next thing you know, you're like, wow, I'm really sore because my capacity allowed me to really attack this thing that I haven't seen in a while. And next thing you know, there I am. And I'll give you some classic examples. Lunging movements for me personally, if it's something I have not seen in a couple of weeks, almost a guarantee that I'm going to be feeling that work for a while. And it almost doesn't matter about the volume, it could be just a couple of sets.
I have that on my list.
Yeah, lunges, right? Very, very common. And so that kind of leads me to my next point, which the third factor is volume. So you have a new movement is almost a guarantee that you're probably going to be sore because it's new. Something you haven't seen in a while, especially if you're coming back to it with a level of fitness that can allow you to get a lot of reps in. And it naturally follows that the total volume you're doing is going to have a pretty significant effect on how sore you are. And that sounds like, reading Anna's comment, that the volume doesn't seem to be a big factor. If we're taking her at her word that she's going into the gym responsibly, she's got good programming behind her, good coaching behind her, she's scaling as she's supposed to be, it sounds like the volume is probably one that we can hopefully take off the table.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have that on my list as well from the lunges, because you might do a movement pattern, but like you said, you might now do a similar movement pattern, but in a more of an unaccustomed manner. So maybe you squat regularly, front squat, back squat, air squat, overhead squat. You're doing wall balls and thrusters. Fantastic, right? And then one day you get in a serious like front rack lunge workout and you're like, no worries, I go below parallel all the time. You will wake up 24 to 48 hours later feeling like you've never gone below parallel in your life. So the movement patterns can be deceptive to some degree. Now, largely they may insulate you to a degree, right? Because if you're neglecting going below parallel and then suddenly you do, well, that makes perfect sense as to why all of a sudden, you feel like your backside is on fire, et cetera, et cetera. So what I also have known, I can do something these days that I have had decent repeated exposure to, and I can almost choose whether or not I will get extremely sore or not. And I'll give you an example. There's a workout coming up I got to do in a couple days, and it's like a heavy day at a high heart rate. There's the prescribed anyways 2.25 on the barbell for men, and it's just 400-meter run, 15 back squats, 400-meter run, 12, 400-meter run, 9. That's it. So you're going to get in 36 back squats at that loading. Done this several times. And when I get back from that first 400-meter run, unrack that barbell for the set of 15. I've got two choices. If I want to, I can try to earn the Medal of Honor that day. And I mean, get the 15. Like it's going to get hard at about 7, and I'm going to stand up, give a couple breaths, and now I can either rack the barbell or do like a double or a triple. Panic, breathe for about 10 seconds, double or triple. Panic, breathe for 10 seconds, and do a couple singles, but never put the bar down. Get to the 15 and do some death wobble for the next 400-meter run, come back in. If I do that, even though I squat regularly, I guarantee you I will feel like I have not squatted in my life. When I get to rep 7, and I'm like, ooh, this is getting challenging, getting a little spicy. If I rack the barbell, unload my body, shake out my legs for about 30 seconds, walk back in, and finish with maybe 2 sets of 4, and that gets me to the 15, a 7-4-4, I will not feel in any way, shape, or form like I did had I grinded it and gutted it out. So same workout, same loading, same rep scheme and all of that. But what I decide to bring with regards to, you could say, my personal intensity to that set has a huge factor. So it can not only be a potentially a different movement that you haven't seen in a while, or it could be something similar that for whatever reason today you decide to be a hero, and that can change the course of it as well. And and maybe this is an individual journey for different athletes, right? Like I've learned over the course of so many workouts and so many years where that fine line is for me, what that feels like in my body for various movements. And I know if I cross this line, that there's a cost that comes with that. And I just make different decisions based upon where I am in my training week, and do I have a rest day coming up and what's on the schedule tomorrow. And I will also say that every now and then, I don't like to be debilitated. Okay. But every now and then, if I do something like a lunge workout or something that hits me a little bit different, and the next day I'm feeling like a nice soreness in my legs, I can walk and all that, but a nice soreness, I'm kind of like, yeah, that was nice. Like I feel like I got outside my comfort zone. I got outside my circle of normal activity in a good way. So there can be a nice side of that coin as well.
Yeah, the only caveat I would add to that is I don't think it's a good idea to get in the habit of equating soreness with progress, because it's easy to start.
Unquestionably, yes.
Yeah, and you do hear it from people sometimes where they're like, well, I haven't been sore in a little while, ergo I'm not making progress. And that's a dangerous road to go down, because you shouldn't be seeking soreness, in my opinion. So a couple of thoughts there that kind of trickled into me there. I think it's interesting, Pat, that you have enough personal knowledge to kind of know where that line is. And I think that will develop with time for most people. And to take it even one step further, this is a concept that was first introduced to me by a guy named Matt Swift, who for many years owned CrossFit gyms in Australia. They're a really brilliant guy, really big brain trainer.
And a beast.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. Just a phenomenal athlete in his own right. Anyway, he introduced this concept of a repetition bank to me. And actually in his teaching, he wrote a how to train master's athletes course for CrossFit, which people can take if they're interested. It's an online course. So check that out if that's something that you're inclined to do. Anyway, the idea is that if you can identify some of these movements that almost without fail make you sore, things like lunges, things like high rep pull-ups, things like GHD sit-ups, whatever it happens to be, you can probably think without too much effort of a short list that you're going to get sore if those movements show up in the workout. Okay, cool. We make a list of those. And then what you do is you establish a minimum baseline of exposure that you try to hit every week with those movements. And so, for example, with pull-ups, you try not to let any 1 week go by in training that you don't see, let's say, 50 pull-ups. And so you divide that up over your sessions. You're like, okay, that's 10 pull-ups a session. That's like my inoculation level of exposure, that if I just do that as part of my warm-up or my cool down or some time of the day that I'm not necessarily training hard, but I get a little taste of it, chances are it's going to help me stave off that extreme soreness when I have a workout that calls me to do 50 in a row. And so it's this minimum level of exposure, a repetition bank that you try not to fall below on each training week. And I thought that was a really brilliant way to ensure that you keep those movements not only fresh technique-wise, but that they don't surprise you a couple weeks later if you haven't seen them in a while. So I really think that's a fun way to start thinking about, okay, how can I deal with this? Instead of just, why is it happening?
Yeah, and you mentioned your friend and mine, the GHD sit-up. And that's one of those ones where, maybe you haven't, I don't know, you've had an off week, you went on vacation and something happened, you didn't get below parallel this week. A week went by. You're going to squat next week, you're going to be a little bit extra sore, that's your gut feeling. That's all good. Something like the GHD, if you have not kept on top of that, the level of soreness and what will occur to your body is at a different level. So some of these movements are not all apples to apples, right? I mean, the GHD is certainly one of those that you want to make sure if some reps come up in a workout and you haven't been on the GHD in a bit, even if you've been doing sit-ups, toes to bar, hollow rocks, V-ups, L-sits, like I don't care what it is. If you haven't been doing GHD sit-ups, you might want to scale the reps down or just swap out the movement for something else. Again, whereas if it's like, I haven't squatted a bit, I'm going to get dosed up from this, but it's all good. That's not the game that I would play with the GHD.
No, definitely not.
When I think of delayed onset muscle soreness, boss, I knew that you would enjoy me saying the whole thing out loud. I think that is 3-bar equal sign to your friend and mine, the bottom to bottom Tabata squats. Because that's another thing that if you haven't done those in a while, they will get your undivided attention. If anyone's unfamiliar with it, the Tabata protocol, 20 seconds of work, 10 seconds of rest, done 8 times. It takes 4 minutes. And I'm sure you remember that back in the day when the CrossFit Level 1 seminar was not only steeped in useful knowledge, but was also basically just like this war of attrition of your body.
Where it was trial by fire.
It was like initiation into a biker gang.
Yeah.
And between people hitting you with a pipe, you got lectures. And so we used to start, every Saturday just before lunch, it was bottom to bottom Tabata squats. And I remember back then when I was a flow master, I was like, I should probably do like some good leadership thing, right? And so I'll volunteer to be the rabbit in the middle and be the guy doing the bottom to bottom Tabata squats.
Very noble of you. Very noble.
Well, I didn't want to, but I forced myself to do it. But I did that, and I volunteered to do it every Saturday for about 1 solid calendar year. I did it every single solitary seminar because I was also such a knucklehead and a caveman that the level of DOMs that I got after that first weekend, in my simple mind, I said, this is unacceptable. I need to repeatedly expose myself to this because this is not good.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I couldn't tell you how long it took, but eventually, I literally did it every Saturday for a year. It got to the point where I could walk out into the circle, do a couple air squats to warm up, hit the bottom Tabata squats, and don't get me wrong, you're going to feel that. It's going to be fatigued, but it was not this life-ruining soreness. It was just my legs are tired. So you can, even with like really challenging, potentially debilitating things like that or a GHD sit-up, with repeated exposure, develop a really powerful tolerance to whatever that happens to be. So,
I was going to say, I think that's a really salient point because Anna said that she'd started CrossFit about a year ago. And so she's still very, in my opinion, well within that beginner phase where you're still ramping up pretty rapidly in that early novice phase where you're making gains quickly, you're getting able to do more reps more quickly, you're being exposed to movements that you've maybe never done before on the regular. So I don't think it's too uncommon to be in that situation. And I will say that, it should get better. That is one of those situations that as you continue with your training, it should be one of those things. And don't get me wrong, every once in a while, you're going to have one of those stinger workouts where you're like, okay, that one caught up to me a little bit more. That's going to happen, but it shouldn't be this perpetual state of, can't walk kind of feeling. So that kind of leads me to my next point. I think identifying the movements that might be the ones that are going to routinely make you sore, figuring out some minimum level of exposure to them weekly. I think that's a great approach. Kind of my second recommendation for Anna would be to look at over the course of a month, let's say, or 6 weeks, is there a period of time there where you consciously say, okay, for the next couple of training sessions, could be 3, could be 5, could be just a week to keep it simple. Am I going to knowingly just kind of decrease the pressure on myself for intensity and reps and allow a bit of a deload week? That used to be a very common occurrence for the old school CrossFitters. In fact, it was recommended by a lot of people that it's like, hey, hit like 3-4 weeks hard and then take a week where you just, you show up and you go through the motions, but you're not really trying to chase any sort of time or weight or reps. Give yourself a chance to just kind of chill for a minute, but stay active and then get back in the gym and hit it hard again. So that's one thing to experiment with. And then the other end of that on a more granular level is if she is working out 5 to 6 days a week, let's call it 6, it's only one rest day, not the end of the world, but I would experiment right out the gate with what happens if I take a second day and if I'm not comfortable turning that into a rest day fully, what if I turn that into a technique day or a lower intensity day where I'm not worried about hitting it hard? What difference does that make? And I would break that up kind of midweek where it'd be maybe 3 days hard, 1 day where you're coming in technique, maybe working on some things that, you just kind of take the foot off the gas and then come back for another 2 days at the end of the week hard, full rest at the end of the week.
I can tell you what's going to happen. She's going to feel great.
I hope so.
Anna, you're not old. I'm in my 40s as well. She says she's 42 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're 42 years old. You're hitting it hard. You're doing it 6 days a week. I could be wrong. I'm wrong hundreds of times a day. But I have a feeling if you did allow yourself potentially an extra rest day, I think it would treat you really well. And if on that rest day you made it, as is the parlance of our times, an active recovery day, where maybe you are moving your body, you're doing some technique work, and maybe even not avoiding the areas that you're sore, but almost embracing them. So let's just stick with you're sore from below parallel, whatever it happens to be. Did some heavy squats, did some thrusters. And whatever you're doing that day, if over the course of your active recovery and technique work, you're doing a little pedaling on the bike, then you come out and you do 5 just real slow air squats. You pedal, you do something else. You come over here, you do 5 slow something. Like, I have found that to be almost really therapeutic to getting those areas moving again. And if you haven't played with that, it may seem counterintuitive. You're like, well, I don't want to use what's already sore. Doing it gently and deliberately and without loading, without intensity, I think you might find the day after that you feel better than had you done nothing at all. So that might be a great thing to do on that rest day, active recovery, technique day, whatever you want to say. And then what that will allow you to do, follow the bouncing ball on this, right? Is if right now you're doing, if we believe that CrossFit works, okay, which I hope that we do. And this might be some oversimplification, so I apologize to the nerds at home. And if we believe that intensity drives results, right? And if we believe that now, and you're working out 6 days a week and you're pretty darn sore, I find it hard to believe that being pretty darn sore isn't, to some degree, limiting your capacity to bring some intensity more frequently than maybe you could if you felt better. And so now it might be hard initially, like, well, you want me to do less? I want to get fit. You want to remove one of my 6 hard workout days a week and replace it with an easier day? Yes. And I think what you might find is that will allow you to make those other days more fulfilling, a bit more intensity, appropriately so. Not that you have to go hard the other 5 days of the week, but I think in the grand scheme of things, that might drive the needle forward faster and in a more sustainable manner than 6 days hard being really darn sore all the time.
Yeah, I agree. And that kind of leads me to one other point that I did want to raise, which is, hey, it's easy to start thinking about soreness as an aspect of progress, both in the sense, like we talked about already, where if I'm not sore, am I making progress? You have to divorce those in your mind because they're not necessarily related at all. But on the other end of that, you need to make sure that when you're in the gym and you're tracking your numbers, you're taking a look at how that coincides as far as if you are getting better. So if you're continuing to get better, but you're sore, and you can come into the gym and you can maintain a level of intensity that is driving your results forward, it's like, okay, well, maybe there's a reason that you're sore that we can figure out. Maybe it's one that we already talked about, or maybe you're just going to acclimate naturally with some more time, and it's okay. If you're still making progress, that's not a cause for concern, in my opinion, that you're sore. If, on the other hand, to Pat's point, you're so sore that you're coming in and now it's like, man, it's becoming harder and harder to get in and get the job done because of this soreness. And I'm starting to see that my results are suffering because of that. Well, we've got something that is up, and that's a big problem that needs to be addressed, because that is not going to be a sustainable model for, and working harder, quote unquote, through that is going to be the worst possible way that you can try to get out of it. And that's often what people do. They're like, I'm sore, my results are tanking, I'm not happy with this, I just need to work harder. And you're like, no, you're going down the wrong road if that's your conclusion at that point.
Can we tell a soreness story? I feel like that's appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely.
You remember your friend and mine, Erwin?
I do, yes. Yeah, I do.
Was he
from the Netherlands?
The Netherlands, thank you.
Yep.
This gentleman named Erwin, who back in the day when we were doing seminars, did we tell the story already in a previous VNR?
We might have talked about Erwin in the past, but you know what? I think it's worth revisiting. He was a fine gentleman.
Yes, he was like this judo practitioner and a beast, like a hoss of an individual. And he was working out at this Blower training facility that we were doing a seminar at. And Adrian was in town for the seminar, and we were going to get in some workout. And all I remember was there was like a 185-pound barbell. And I want to say it had some power cleans. Maybe it had a front squat in it or something like that. It was something along those lines. But this guy's like, hey, I don't think he did any CrossFit or anything at all. You just,
at that point,
obviously he's just doing judo and in judo shape. He's like, can I work out with you guys? We're like, sure. The more the merrier. And he was one of those people that was just like farm strong. Like he was just strong. Technique wasn't there. I'm not going to lie to you, but it was farm. Like, rip the head off a lion sort of strong.
I'll tell you, I mean, I think that is, there's certain sports, judo being one of them, that if you're taking that to a high level, I mean, it does matter what your training is. Obviously, it's going to impact how far you can take that. But the very nature of that sport is going to produce an athlete that is pretty capable.
Right.
So he's got a good base to be working from. We'll put it that way.
We do this workout, whatever it was, okay? And it was just a CrossFit workout. And obviously with a slightly heavy bias, especially back then, 185 in the bar.
Yeah.
And we show up the next day for what I assume must have been day 1 of the seminar, maybe. And we're doing whatever, we're doing our thing, lectures moving around. And at some point in time, Erwin enters and he walks up to Adrian and I, and he was like, my friends. And we're like, hey, Erwin, how are you? Good to see you. And he's just a little pause and he goes, my friends, are you sore? And I remember we were like, no, are you? And he goes, oh, yes. Oh, yes. And it was just exactly what we talked about. As fit and active and beastly as he was in his domain, he then did a bunch of things that he was unaccustomed to. Mm-hmm. And this exposure to an unaccustomed movements left him with just devastating muscle soreness, right? I mean, so again,
Yeah.
repeated exposure, crawl, walk, run, and you can, to some degree, inoculate yourself a good deal. But
Yep.
what a beast! What a beast!
Yeah. What a beast.
Any
Man.
any closing thoughts on the old DOMs?
Yeah, I just have one more really basic one. Well, let me say two.
Okay.
One that you already touched on, which is, it's been my experience, and I think it's most people's experience, that if you want to stay sore, when you get sore, do nothing at all. It's way better to do some light activity and continue to allow the body to flush and have blood flow and that sort of thing, than it is to just lay up on the couch and hope for the best. Almost always.
Yep.
If you can get around and do something, low intensity, whatever, it's going to be, to Pat's point, therapeutic in that way. So that's one. And then two, this is a really simple one that I think is easy to overlook, especially given the profile of Anna. She's 42, she's a mother, not athletic until later in her life, by her own admission, just started CrossFit. Super simple. How much protein are you eating on a regular basis? Just make sure that you're eating an adequate amount of protein throughout the day and throughout the week, because that can have a dramatic impact on how long you're going to stay sore, how fast you can regenerate. And that would be, honestly, probably one of the first places I'd look. I'd be like, hey, look, training seems like it's pretty reasonable. You're having trouble with soreness. Let's take a look under the hood really quickly and make sure that the protein intake is adequate for the activity that you're trying to engage in.
Yep.
Really simple.
And I'm going to say something that you said earlier, but maybe just in a different way, because most CrossFitters probably need to hear it again. And most CrossFitters, I think, tune this out when it's said. Subconsciously tune it out when you say, maybe you shouldn't go hard today. They're like, what? There's nothing wrong. Again, I like to think that I understand a couple things about CrossFit. I understand that intensity drives results. I understand that's an oversimplification. And I also understand that if you are particularly sore, markedly sore, and name the area, heavy deads, hit up the backside, whatever it is, and now 2 or 3 days later, a workout's going to have a similar movement pattern, more hinging at the hip, more below parallel, whatever it is, and you still feel like, oof, I'm more dosed up than I thought that I would be. All hope is not lost. It's okay. Fitness will be achieved. You'll be fine. I promise you'll be fine if you just do that workout at a moderate pace that day. And moderate pace is not something that CrossFitters like to hear every now and then, but allow yourself and give yourself that grace that if every now and then you can make almost any workout into a active recovery workout, if you just really slow the darn thing down. I mean, you change the nature of the workout incredibly. If I do Cindy and I try to PR, that's one thing. If I do Cindy and I intentionally do 5 rounds, that's an entire, it's still Cindy, but took a ton of rest, shook it out, walked over, drank some water. I'm going to feel totally different after that. So you can allow yourself to just, again, like I said, on the back squats, if I break them up, it's one sort of workout. If I don't break them up, it's a very different workout. So I could allow myself to move, take a little bit more breaks than I used to, and I will probably come out of that training session feeling way better than I went in. Life's good, and your work capacity will survive. I promise you that. So I think that's all I got on the old DOMs.
Yeah, me too. Good luck to you out there.
Do you remember the last thing that dosed you up?
Oh, man, these days it doesn't take much, Pat. I have to say my consistency this summer has been not amazing. So it's as far as general soreness, it's a regular occurrence. I'm trying to think like the most significant recent memory. Nothing jumps to mind immediately. I can think about most sore ever, but but immediately nothing really jumps out to me.
I could tell you, I'll leave you with this for just variance. I just got back from a family vacation. We went and saw the mouse there at Disney, and I went into I actually texted you. I was like, I'm at the hotel gym, and they have dumbbells up to 80 pounds. They had dumbbells up to 80 pounds. Like, I don't have those in my garage. I was so happy. So I went in there, snuck away from the family on day one. As we all know, I have an issue. And it just walked in and did 6 rounds for time. Not even that quickly. I'm going to be honest with you. I guess I just got off a plane. 6 rounds for time of 10 dumbbell deadlifts with the 80s and 10 burpees. Just a simple little couplet. But you've got to scoot down a bit further to touch the dumbbells and the ground and all this. So just that little extra range of motion, and doing it with dumbbells instead of a barbell, I was more dosed up the next day than I thought I was going to be, because even though I'm deadlifting all the time and doing all this stuff, it was just different enough that it hit me in a little bit different way. Not atrociously sore, but in that good way that I was like, ooh, nice. All right. I got a little bit outside my comfort zone yesterday. Those dumbbells are kind of cool. So yeah, that got me. I'm feeling good today. So that's it. As we always say, we appreciate the comments and the questions. We read them. We're going to continue to read them and continue to help them drive the content of the show. So if you've got anything on your mind, post it. Go to the btwb YouTube channel, find this episode. You can either, what I would love to hear too? Tell me if you've got some particular workout that's stamped in your head that made you so sore that it's like you've got trauma from it. Let me know what it is there in the comments. I would love to see that. But also, if you've just found ways to help alleviate states of being quite sore, that would be great knowledge for us to share with each other. And so if you're listening to this in audio format, of course, we appreciate the support. But head on over to that YouTube channel, like I mentioned, and post a comment. So for Adrian Bosman, I'm Pat Sherwood, and we will see you next time.